This is going to be a long one. This is going to be a talk. This is going to be a story. I had a experience and I want to share it. This happened like 2 years ago, I would say. Maybe 2015. It might have even been the tail end of 2014. But I think that it has some prevalence. I just wanted to share it. There's, I don't know if I told a lot of people. I know I've told my parents this story, and I've told my sister this story. I know I've told one of my friends this story. I don't know if I've told a lot of people this story, but it seems prevalent. I'm in a sociology class right now, and the professor is very anti-religion, very anti-everything American. I don't know how you're going to teach sociology and be so against the country that allows you to teach it freely. It's a little strange. But he says that there's no justifiable way for religion to happen. And while I get what he's saying, it doesn't really make that much sense to me because he hasn't had any experience. He said he's decided that he's done with religion when he was in 8th grade. He read a book, and then he turned Marxist. A book. Well, that's great. That's okay that you can do that, but you haven't had an experience. And so I had an experience that showed me who God really is and made himself real to me, because I was walking down a path that was very dangerous, I guess. I'm not really sure. I smoked a lot of weed. That's not the issue here. The issue is that I was not getting high off of weed anymore. I wanted to get that first high feeling. So I decided to, I wasn't getting high off of weed anymore. I wanted to get that first high back. So my friends introduced me to Spice, K2, whatever you want to call it. And I was smoking Spice a lot, and it wasn't, it wasn't that good. There's different qualities and, some botanical incense. But this was like an expensive spice. We got it at a smoke shop, and I didn't buy it. They bought it, both of them. And so when we're driving back to one of their houses, one of them's in the back seat. They pack a bowl, take a hit, and I start hearing him like trying to say some words. He was saying, "Oh, no," and I was like, "What?" And we were like, "What?" And they were like, "No, no." And he said, "Don't do it, don't do it." And he was trying to say, "Don't hit that spice," because it was some like poison. And so the other friend said, whatever, and he packed a bowl, took a hit, and so they packed. So after he took a hit, I took a hit, but I didn't take a big hit. I kind of like cornered it just a tiny little bit, little tiny bit. And I was like, wow, that's a really powerful. I'm very high. I feel like high. Now I have to preface that before this, when I'd be smoking Spice, I'd be very guilty all the time, because I know I'm not supposed to do that. If I wanted to live with my parents, if I wanted to live the life that I wanted to live, I'm not supposed to get high. And for years I've been, always trying to hide it and do everything about this. And I got found out a lot. I've been homeless a couple times. And this is after the time where I was given grace again and allowed back into the house. So I knew that this would be bad. So when I'd be smoking Spice, when I would be doing that, I would hear this voice, and this wasn't like this wasn't an inner me voice. This wasn't, how you would hear your own voice in your head when, like, your conscience, and it'd be telling you what to do. This wasn't that voice. This was an entirely different voice that didn't belong to me. It was its own. It had its own mind, if that makes sense. And so So it would be telling me, you know, whenever I'd smoke little tines of spice, it would be yelling at me. It would be telling me evil things, and I can't remember specifically evil things that it was saying, but it would be saying some really bad things to me. And I'd always feel incredibly guilty, and it would want me to be mad at myself. And this wasn't my inner voice. This wasn't, you know, the voice that I hear in my head telling me these things. This was an entirely different entity. And so I didn't hear that voice when I took that little tiny smang off the side corner of that. I was like, whoa. And they were both looking at me after they sobered up after like 2 minutes or whatever. They're like, oh, you don't feel anything? I was like, no, I just feel a little high, because I barely hit it. It was nothing. It was barely a hit. And so I dropped them off, because they're like, we're done hanging out. We got to go, you know, hide, because we're afraid and whatever. And so I asked for like a bowl's worth, right? So I had like a bowl's worth, because, you know, they got high, so I wanted to get high. So drop one off, go down the street, drop another off, go back to my area of the city, drive in, and then when I get nearish to my house, maybe about like a block or two away, I pull over into a parking lot and I pack a bowl into a little, you know, I pack a bowl into the bowl. And so I give him my lighter, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I gotta take a breath, because I know this is probably going to be intense. So I grab my pom pom. You know what pom pom is? It's a little 50-cent cigar, and usually it's a really low quality blunt. You would not even smoke it. You just rip it open, put some weed in it, roll it up, smoke it like a blunt. Yeah, but it would taste really bad, because it's a really. But I would be smoking them for the nicotine, because I was cheap. I didn't have a lot of money. And so they'd be 50 cents, incredibly affordable, and it lasts like, you know, you could have a very long smoke session with that. So I took that out and I placed it on my lap right here. And so then I put it right there, and then I take the spice in the bowl, and I take the lighter, right, and I take a fat hit. You know, I take it, hit it, hold it in. And, you know, spice really doesn't hit you until after you exhale. So I was like, you know, whatever. And then I exhaled, and I started feeling weird. And then I started relating with what my homie said in the back seat, where he was like, don't do it. And he was dead serious too. He said, don't do it. Because this spice wasn't normal spice. It was like poison. And if you ever have had like, salvia before, imagine mixing salvia with spice, with like ketamine, with like I've never done ketamine, but I know you go into like a K-hole. That's what I hear, where you have to be by yourself. And so imagine that. I think this spice was like incredibly over sprayed, and so it was incredibly intense. And so I started feeling everything go weird in my body, right? So I felt, you know, I started feeling weird in my chest, in my body area. And so I was like, oh God, no. So I was like, no, I need to smoke a cigarette. And so I took the pom pom, and I real quickly grabbed my papa's knife that he used for fishing, right? And so I pulled, you know, nip it open. I cut it open real nice and smooth. And the thing about pom pom is, if you take about half the tobacco out of it, you know, half of the crap, and then, you know, even out that rest of the tobacco, so it's about half in there, and then re-roll it up like it's a blunt, but it's, you know, it's half full of tobacco, and that's it. It's actually a lot more smoother to taste, and tastes more like an actual like Marlboro Red. I mean, not really like a Marlboro Red, but it gives you a nice throat hit rather than a very dry, airy, big cigar hit. So what I did, I cut it open, took half the tobacco out. You know, I had a piece of paper on the other, on my passenger seat. You know, I take that out, put the tobacco over there. Then so, you know, I'm in the process, and like I smooth it out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and so I get it, roll back up. You know, I'm about to light this up, right? And so I'm about to light this up, and then all of a sudden, in retrospect, I had a brain aneurysm, or I think I died in that chair, because instantly after I finished rolling that up, right? Got the knife on my pants. Got a lighter. Got a little bit of tobacco on me. Got, you know, piece of paper over there. Got like a nicely rolled little bit of half of a pom-pom. So I think I died, and I was instantly in front of the presence of the Lord, and I was in, as it says in the Bible, the throne room, the where He is sitting, and so what that looks like is very closely represented in the book of Revelation. And at this time, I didn't read the Bible. You know, I still haven't read the full Bible from cover to cover, understanding its whole meaning. I still haven't done that. But there's a passage in Revelation where it describes the golden, the fire torches, you know, which is representative. And so imagine as if you see me right now. There's a throne, and then down there, you know, imagine if I was like that big in retrospect to me as I am right now. Now put me, who's about 1 inch tall, on my leg. Now that's about how big I was in retrospect to the Lord who was sitting in the throne, and then behind Him, encompassing, you know, and then the throne is huge, made of stone. It looks kind of like that scene in Simpsons where, you know, Homer can see his feet only. And so, but behind him, there's these golden torches that are on fire, and there's like 100 of them, and they encompass the whole back. They go around the back, come out on the side, and they stop about right here, and he's sitting there like this, and I'm about this tall down there sitting at His feet, and I look up, and I'm trying to look up, right, because, you know, you're in the presence of the Lord, you want to look, and I could physically not look up high. Like, I could not. I could probably see up to knees, right? And from like knees up, it was like this blinding white light, literally blinding. I could not let my eyes see it. My eyes could not focus on it. I couldn't see through it. It hurt my eyes to look at. And I remember this vividly. I was trying to look through it, and that just is more, you know, it makes more sense now, because you got if you're not ready to see, if He's not ready to let you see Him, you're not going to see Him. But He let me know His presence was there by placing me in front of Him. And then so on His right side of the throne, there was a black void floating there, right? So there's a black void floating there. And on the other side, there's an opposite color void floating there. And I say opposite color, like I'm not going to say it's white, because it wasn't. It was just opposite color. But there was this void, right? And He said, behold. And He said, look. So I looked. You can't say no, you know, but it wasn't like I could look myself. I was drawn to look. Like I had to look. My face, my whole everything looked as He said, behold, and I beheld. And over there, there's this void. And you see this void, and you look in it. And the second my eyes made contact with that void, I was sucked in there, and I was surrounded by, you know, emptiness. And this emptiness is, I can describe it as this emptiness, it is as if nothing is around you. I guess that could be described as darkness, blackness, but it wasn't the color of black. It was just literally nothing around you, right? Nothing. And that can be attributed to the color of darkness. So let's say that I'm surrounded by darkness. And over there in front of me, where you guys are, like I'm sitting here, right? I'm surrounded by the void, and I see over there, it's infinitely far away from me, but I see that that's the exit. That over there, that is where the Lord is. That is the exit, and that's the throne room over there. And it's like a hole. It's like a hole, and you see it, and it's over there, and you cannot get to it. And you can run and sprint and scratch and claw your way, and you'll never get there, and it'll never come any closer. It's like the light at the end of the tunnel that never gets any closer. You can keep going towards it, but it stays far away. And there's this presence in there, and it's not just me. all of a sudden what became clear to me was that there was another entity in there. And that entity was, well, it didn't have a name. It was named by me after I came out of it. And I decided to name it the Tormentor. And this presence, this entity, this being, it had no shape that human words can describe. It had a form that was there, and it didn't I couldn't see it, but it was there, right? So it was there. It was me in the void, the exit to the void, and in between me and the exit was this presence, which kept me from getting any closer. And so because I was going towards the exit the whole time, the Tormentor decided to place a burden on me that was probably the worst thing I've ever felt in my life. I found out that that voice that I've been hearing when I was getting high on spice was the voice of another entity inside of that void. And I attribute that to, I would say, the devil. And I'll tell you why. Because, and I'll tell you this, is that there's the Tormentor, and his job is to torment you. And then there's the ruler of the Tormentor, which I will attribute to Satan. And he tells the Tormentor what to do, but the Tormentor doesn't contact you. Satan will contact you. And he contacts you through your own head. And so that evil voice I've been hearing was starting to talk to me again. Now, the Tormentor had a job to do. He needed to burden me. And it's been a long time since this happened. And I've been thinking about it, about what that could be, about what that burden could be. Because for the longest time, I was unable to attribute any English words to the pain that I felt that the Tormentor was burdening me with while in the void, separated from God. Knowing that that exit was there and God was on the other side of that exit, knowing that I'll be eternally separated because I'll never be let out. That's what's going to happen to you when you choose to live a life opposite of the Lord. And because I turned my back on God, that was my punishment, to have God, to know that he existed and to never be able to unite with him is the worst pain that could ever be felt. It was horrible. And that pain was such a heavy burden. And to know that he was over there and to not get there, it was horrible. And so in the time that since this happened, I've been thinking about it, and I could only attribute that pain and burden that was placed on me to the equivalent of what Christ felt on the cross when he had to take everybody's sin and place it on his own shoulders. And it was enough to kill him. And, so what I felt while in that void, the Tormentor took every negative feeling I've ever felt in my life, every negative emotion, all the guilt, all the embarrassment, all the things I can't change, all the things I feel bad about, everything that I wanted to do in life that I couldn't do was being put on my shoulders. I felt this pain, this suffering, and it turns out it wasn't just my pain and suffering. Everybody who was also in that void, that was my void. But everybody else who deserved to be in that void, all of their pain and all of their suffering and all of their embarrassment and all of their sadness and sorrow, I had to feel that too. And I couldn't bear it. I couldn't stop it either, and I couldn't get out of there. I was panicking. How do I leave this? What do I do? And so the voice of Satan, who is in control of the tormentor, was telling me that the only way out was to kill myself. Not kill myself in the void, kill myself in real life. All of this is happening while I'm sitting in my driver's seat in a parking lot a few blocks away from my house with a pom-pom in my hand and a knife on my lap. Well, how am I going to kill myself with those materials? Well, the choice was obvious. My grandpa's knife to my throat. He said, kill yourself, slit your throat, do it. And he repeated the mantra of do it infinitely. I was in that void for what felt to be years. Years. And for years, I was hearing this evil voice say, do it. And I was fighting it and panicking. He said, the only way out, you have to do it. You will never leave here. You will never leave here. So I obliged him. I grabbed it, right? And so I went to put it to my throat. And as Matt Sherwood doesn't know how to slit his own throat. I don't know where a vein is. I don't know where a jugular is. I don't know what this is. But that demon voice, that voice of the devil, it knew how to kill myself. It knew what to tell me. Right now, my brain is not in my body. It's in the void. I am separated from my body because I believe at that time I had died. Okay? So, my brain is elsewhere. It's dead. It's trying to come back to life, and I'm in the presence of the demon tormentor and Lucifer, the devil, and in my body, which I am not in control of at all. I am not in control. I have no movement on my fingers or anything. I snap back to my body slightly. I slightly snap back to my body. I'm going in between flashes. It's like in those old movie films where you see, a flash of this and a flash of that, and I'm going back and forth. And in my movement, I feel a possession, and I pick the knife up and I put it to my throat, and I wouldn't do this. Matt Sherwood wouldn't do this, but the demon would, and he knew the way to slit my throat was to not just pull the knife across. It was to jam it into my jugular and jam it into my throat and then carve. So I was about to do that, and I started pushing the knife into my throat, and it was at that point that God said enough and come out. And so I instantly was out. I was out of the void, but I was not in my car either. I was instantly in front of him again, but for a split second. Only a split second. It was not long enough for me to observe the room that he was in like I did before, with its glorious white columns, and it was going up infinitely as high as the sky can see, and these angels just surrounding him in thrones, and he was in the main and all of that. I couldn't observe these things. I saw only what do you want me to see? He said, observe again. And I looked and I observed the other side. And I saw that, and how opposite to the void where I got sucked in, the other one, it engulfed me. I did not get sucked into that one. That one became me. I was surrounded. And I believe this was a glimpse of heaven after showing a real image of hell. Now, this glimpse of heaven, I can't describe it in English. I can't describe it in Latin or any human languages. I don't know how to describe it, really. It's understandable now why in the Bible that you hear of these stories where They try to the best of their ability to describe what they've seen using the words that they have at the time. I'll give you an example. A chariot of fire coming from the sky. They don't know what that is. It could be a literal chariot with a horse, or it could be something else, because they didn't have the right words to describe it, right? They didn't know at that time how to use their vocabulary to describe it. And I don't know how to use my vocabulary to describe what I seen when that opposite void, what I believe to be heaven, enveloped me, engulfed me, and I became one with it, inside of it. What I can say is that I believe that the feeling I had in there was the opposite of the void. And that's the best way I can describe it, and it's this. While in the void, you felt everybody else's sorrow, everybody else's sadness, everybody else's pain, suffering, tragedy, loss, despair, combined into one heavy load placed on your shoulders that you cannot get rid of. Combine that with the feeling of knowing that God exists and never being able to reunite with him again. That was the feeling that I felt in the void. Now, contrast the complete opposite. That's what I felt on the other side. And it wasn't because that burden was now lifted off my shoulders. I felt joy, happiness, belonging, safety, acceptance, because, now this is what I believe. I felt these things because what was in that other side over there, that was the presence of the Lord, and I felt it. He was with me, walking with me, and he cast away that burden I felt. And it was no longer there with me, and I was with him. And everyone was there. There weren't faces. There wasn't beings. There wasn't floating, because it's not ready yet. When it's ready, we'll be called up. But it's not ready yet. It's not finished. The party's not being done, set up. So I didn't see everything. But God was there with me. And I felt his presence. And I felt one with him. And so, you know, it says in the Bible that it will come as if a thief in the night, instantly, without warning, there will be no warning. It'll just happen, and it'll happen faster than the twinkle of an eye, right? So science has tried to measure the twinkling of an eye, and I don't have the right number, but I know it's very, very soon. It's very, very fast, the twinkling of an eye. I was shown the void for what seemed to be, I would say, years I was in there, right? But it wasn't years, as we all know. I was sitting in a driver's seat with a knife in my hand for 2 minutes. I smoked the spice at 3:59 in the afternoon, and I came back to at 4:01 in the afternoon. But all these things I saw were incredibly vivid. And when I was in the heavenistic place, I was with the Lord, united for what seemed to be a millisecond. If I could use scientific notation, I would say 0.0000000 to the 10th power times nil infinitely. It was such a micro, infinitesimal second that I was in there, yet I was able to feel the relief and love and kindness of the Creator, and it was beautiful enough to snap me out of it. So I was snapped out of it. You remember how I said that I had rolled a nice little cigarette for me to smoke? Well, boy, sure did I want to smoke that. So I looked around and it was nowhere to be found. And I will tell you why, because I didn't have a piece of paper on the side of my passenger seat where I put the rest of the tobacco. No, that didn't even exist. I didn't cut the blunt open. That didn't happen either. I didn't spark the pom-pom either. I didn't do any of that. What had happened was I lit it on fire and put it out on my pants and ripped it with my hands, and there was tobacco all over my hands and all over my pants, and the knife was in my right hand, and I dropped it, and I realized I was back in my car, and I started having convulsions. I was shaking, I was breathing erratically, and I was afraid of what just happened. And I will tell you that I had a real dilemma in front of me, because the first thing I did was sob. I cried the hardest I've ever cried in my life, and it was the worst feeling I've ever had of embarrassment and what have I been doing. And the life of an addict will tell you that all that you do is inconsequential until you get your next high. But I wanted to tell my parents, but I've been getting high for a year now on spice. I totally gave up weed. I don't smoke weed. I was high on spice all the time. And I didn't want to tell them, and I felt embarrassed. And I began to re-feel those emotions that I felt in the void of embarrassment and sorrow. And so after a few minutes of crying, I decided to go home. And I wanted to tell my parents so badly, I really did. I wanted to tell them, but I didn't. I walked right by, and they knew something was wrong, and I wanted to tell them another time. And I don't remember how long it took me for me to tell them this story. But I do know life has been different since then. But I was an addict back then, because right when I came out of the trance I was in, when I gained control of my body again, I took the metal pipe, which it was metal, and threw it out the window of the parking lot, and I drove back home. And I was confident I was never going to do this again, ever. I woke up the next morning and drove back to that parking lot, and I finished that bowl. I didn't have an experience. I didn't have a high. It was just a depletion of life. I just felt like I needed to do it again. And that was 2015. It's now almost the tail end of 2017. I've been sober off of marijuana, alcohol, spice, cigarettes, anything, since August 16th, 2016. It's almost been one full year now. And pretty happy with the way that I've been living. I got off spice soon after that. I would say not even a half a month later. My friends were still on it, and then they gave up on it too, because another one of our friends was destroying his life with it. And after we all had our experience with this very strong spice, we decided it wasn't worth it anymore, and went back to weed. And then years went the year went by, and I was kicked out of my parents' house again, and I went to Teen Challenge, and I became closer with God again, and left Teen Challenge, and then I started smoking again for a few months, and then August hit, and I quit everything. So it's been almost a year, and I'm happy about that. But that was my story, and I believe that I had that experience because I could have seen anything, right? I could have seen anything. Now, why would I see that? Why would I see that, what I saw? I could have just as easily hit it, looked out the window, been very high, and seen a pink bunny rabbit hopping down the street with the face of Ronald Reagan. I could have seen anything. Why did I see that? Because I believe now, as a almost 25-year-old adult, sitting with a sober mind, that God wanted me to see that. And knowing that God is real in my heart and in my head, it was time for him to make himself known for me. And he did. And I'm very grateful. And what hurts is that my college career has been full of people who don't believe in what I believe. And while they're allowed to do that as Americans, and while they're allowed to do that as free-thinking individuals, it hurts because they have turned their back on God. And I know where they're going to go. This is all personal experience. This is all personal opinion. But to me, that's what's going to happen to them because I seen it. I lived it. Now, of course you can say that what I experienced was only a spice trip. It wasn't real. Sure. Scientifically, that's how it's going to be explained scientifically. But in my brain, what happened was God made himself real to me and showed me what I was doing and showed me it's time for a change. And now I'm living changed. It still took me a while. I'm still an addict. I'm still not done with it. I'm going to always be an addict. I'm going to have to learn to deal with it, which I am. I have the support of my family. They love me. I'm trying to do the best. But I felt like I needed to share my experience. And I'm not embellishing anything. There's nothing that I'm over-exaggerating on. Everything happened as I said it. I just don't want to name names or name places where I got that spice to have other people go and try it. I don't even know if spice is legal anymore in California. I think it isn't. It shouldn't be. But it was really bad. So I wanted to share the story because I wanted to maybe get my story out there and have somebody hear it. And if they can relate, that's great. And that means we're not alone. And it's funny because I'd never read Revelation before, right? And then I did end up reading Revelation after my experience. And the stuff that was written in Revelation is so close to what I seen in my vision that it makes sense to me. That's even more proof in my mind that what I saw was legitimate. And especially the throne room and the layout of it, and all of the other beings sitting on their chairs, and it just makes sense to me. So that is a story I wanted to share, and I hope that somebody can get something out of this. And if you do get something out of that, let me know. We can chat it up. And I hope everybody has a great day. And this is what happens, in my opinion, after you die.